Right people, as we get closer to the release of the iPhone SE4, we have new dummy models, and yes, I said dummies in plural because there's actually two iPhone SEs. You may be a little confused, but let me break this down. So Japanese blog Makatakara always shares dummy units on a regular basis for future Apple releases. They're relatively credible, and today they gave us a look at the iPhone SE4, except according to their sources, there's also going to be a bigger size option. Obviously, we know this phone's going to be based on the iPhone 14, so an SE Plus could make sense, considering the 14 came in a 6.1 inch and 6.7 inch variant. Also, Apple kind of surprised us by keeping the 14 Plus in the range, whereas they killed off the minis pretty quick, and so directly replacing that and also the regular 14 with brand new SE models could actually make sense. However, I do want to mention that number one, Makatakara says the bigger model's 6.5 inches for whatever reason, which is clearly wrong because based on the dimensions they've provided, this looks to be the same size as the 14 Plus. But also remember, this is literally the first time we're hearing about a larger model, and usually something this substantial would have leaked months back. There was actually talk back in 2020 about the SE Plus, but we only got one size option and the SE2 replaced both the iPhone 8 and the 8 Plus in the range. So don't get your hopes up based on this news. I would like to see a bigger SE for those who want the new chipset the SE has, but with a big screen and battery life though, of course, nothing is confirmed yet. Makatakara also claims that the final precision design and size expansion has not been decided, whatever that means, and so I guess they're even a little unsure about the bigger size, but I'm hoping it does happen. You know what else I would absolutely take, guys? If you subscribe to the channel, of course. It's free and would bring you the latest about Apple right to subscription box, so please consider it. It would be appreciated. Join the saranbyte gang now. Anyways, focusing on the design changes we see with these dummies, there's a little different overall, but on the back we have a single lens compared to dual cameras on the 14, and also we have a mute switch compared to the action button that newer iPhones have, and also of course the older notch style, which newer iPhones have gotten rid of, but is actually a good thing for Apple since they want this phone to look slightly more dated compared to the 15 and 16. The dimensions of the regular SE dummy unit are 146.7mm by 71.5mm by 7.8mm, which is identical to the existing iPhone 14. And because of this, soft TPU cases for the iPhone 14 work just fine, although do remember the camera cutout is much bigger than it needs to be because the 14 has dual cameras. Makatakara also mentions the mute switch is apparently slightly smaller than the 14 for whatever reason, although the volume buttons and the side button are the same. Anyways, let's recap everything we know about the SE, and guess what? Gurman comes to save the day because he does just that in a new report. For one, he says this will be similar to the iPhone 14, which is not a surprise, we've known this for a while. The dummy units also show this, but someone like Gurman chiming in is pretty big news. This alone means we're getting Face ID instead of Touch ID, and also a 6.1 inch OLED display, which is going to be a massive upgrade over the 4.7 inch LCD panel we have right now. But more excitingly, Gurman clarifies on some confusion regarding the SE4 supporting Apple Intelligence or not. Previously, Ice Universe told us we could see, and I quote, 6 to 8 gigs of LPDDR5 memory, which does suggest you might get different amounts of RAM depending on the storage tier you go for. This is quite common in the Android world, but would be a first for the iPhone, though do remember the iPad Pros have done this for a while. The base iPad Pros have 8 gigs of RAM and higher storage variants get 16 gigs of RAM. But anyways, if certain amounts of the SE get 6 gigs of RAM, they would not be able to run Apple Intelligence because it seems 8 gigs is the minimum needed. And so as I'd mentioned in previous videos, I definitely do not see Apple doing this. It would be very confusing if high storage variants only supported a very key feature, and thankfully Gurman now makes it clear the SE4 is going to have Apple Intelligence as standard, so expect all models to come with 8 gigs of RAM. To be fair, considering the A18 is going to be used in this, we can for sure expect 8 gigs of RAM since they're most likely just going to be plopping iPhone 16 motherboards into the new SE4. Anyways, moving on to other details, Unknowns21 says that partially assembled prototypes of the next SE have been equipped with lithium-ion batteries bearing the model number A2863, which Apple has already used in the past, but guess what? You won't see this coming! The iPhone 14. Now the actual capacity is 3,279 mAh, which is a massive upgrade over the 2018 mAh battery the current SE has. I actually have used the SE3 as a beta testing device, and whilst the battery life isn't terrible, it's only just about good enough in my opinion, and so this having a similar battery capacity to the iPhone 14 is fantastic news because the 14 in my experience got me 7 or 8 hours of screen on time, and that's plenty enough for most consumers. Unlens21 then continues explaining the obvious and says Apple's gonna be reusing components to save money, and oh my god, who'd have seen that coming? But jokes aside, this is the blueprint for the SE in general. It's a recycle bin iPhone. Whatever components can be found in the parts bin for a low price ends up being the new SE. And while right now they're still producing the iPhone 14, it's technically the oldest non-SE device they sell, so yes, this makes it the perfect candidate for the SE4. Remember, the SE2 replaced the iPhone 8 that was still being produced, and the SE1 replaced the 5S that was still being produced. Now let's delve into what you probably want to know about the most, which is the release date and price. We should expect this to launch in the spring of 2025, just like every other iPhone SE release. It's what leakers are saying, and it just makes sense. Now, pricing wise, I do think the new SE is going to be a little more expensive than the outgoing model. I mean, did we really expect Apple to give us a new design, OLED, a better camera, and all the other changes for the same price? This is not a charity, guys. Tim's here to make some big bucks, and so obviously it's going to be more expensive, and Apple can justify it. Now, there is a chance it could be $50 cheaper than the iPhone 14, which is currently $599, and if you're wondering why I think this, it's because when the SE2 released, that was $399 and replaced the $449 iPhone 8. And so the same thing could happen here, but I don't expect it to be any cheaper than $499. That's the lowest Apple's gonna go. Now, that could mean the SE3 stays in the range for $399, which even then would still be horrible value, but considering the iPad 9 stayed when the iPad 10 originally released, I would not be surprised if Apple does the same with the SE. But hopefully when the SE3 has been around for a year or so, we do see a price cut, just like the iPad 10 recently became $349. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching. So the new M4 MacBook Pros are finally official, and the big news is really to do with the base model. It's got a bevy of changes compared to the older M3 model, and so let's delve in. Number one, much like the new iMac and Mac Mini, we finally have 16 gigs of RAM as standards for $1599 with the base 14-inch. Thank you, Timothy, for blessing us with this. This is awesome news, especially since this model already came with 512 gigs of storage. And so I can now recommend this model to literally everyone. RAM, however, can be maxed out to 32 gigs if you wish, and you also get up to 2 terabytes of storage. The base model also gains a space black option from last year's M3 Pro and M3 Max models, and also it gains the additional port on the right side, because the M4 does have more Thunderbolt controllers. You also get access to the full fat M4 with the base model, so that's 10 CPU cores and 10 GPU cores for the base price, and it now supports 2 external displays, and so overall this is